In this video, we are breaking down the 7 wide receivers you need to be trading for before it's too late. Your trade deadline in fantasy is quickly approaching. I know that for a fact. So right now is the time to actually improve your squad. And you could start by going out there and acquiring the rookie wide receiver, second round pick, the Chargers receiver, Ladd McConkey. Man, this dude is so good. A lot of you know that based on what he did in week 8, but let's kind of just break down how good the role has been, including what he just did this past weekend. According to Fantasy Life, McConkey went out there in week 9. He ran 94% of the routes, which basically tied a season high for him, meaning he's out there for every single passing play, basically at this point that a wide receiver's on the field, and 27% target share for Ladd McConkey. Now, what does that mean? A 27% target share at the end of the year would rank somewhere around the top 10 wide receivers. It's alpha wide receiver usage, and it's the 7th time in 8 games this year that McConkey has led the team in target share. So he continues to see great volume in an offense that is surprisingly passing the ball a lot more the past month of the season. Like, of course, Justin Herbert is the team's quarterback, and he's an awesome quarterback at that, but this team under Jim Harbaugh was known to really be a run-first team. Like, heading into the season, it's Jim Harbaugh's back, it's Greg Roman, an offensive coordinator. These guys run the ball nonstop on offense. And that was definitely the case to start the year. Just 26 pass attempts, 27 pass attempts the first month of the season for Justin Herbert. But then, this next month of the season, coming out of the bye week, things changed. Season high 34 pass attempts. A new season high in week 7, 39, 32, and 27 pass attempts. Every single week since the bye week, they've had at least 27 pass attempts and are averaging 32 attempts per game, which has been helping Ladd McConkey a ton. Because if we pull up the box scores of Ladd McConkey, the rookie here, and we just scroll to what he's been doing these last 4 games of the season, you can see right here, coming off of this 11-point fantasy day, a 29-point day where he's the number 2 receiver on the week, won you some weeks. And then he's coming out here and getting 10 and 8 fantasy points, which aren't great overall, but those are situations where he's still going out and earning a 25 to 30% target share. Including in week 8, where I mentioned he had that big performance, 111 yards, multiple touchdowns, caught all 6 of his targets in this game where he saw 25 or so percent target share. And then this continued this past week where you get a nice 11-point performance, nothing crazy here, but 5 catches for 64 yards, 7 targets. There was a target later in the game that probably would have went for about 20 yards. Justin Herbert had to go on the run, scramble, head towards the out of bounds marker, and just missed Ladd McConkey for what would have been a 6-catch, 85-yard day, even better. The point being here is that this rookie just continues to get open. He continues to get open, and it's only going to get better as the season goes on. Again, he's only played 8 games in the NFL. And this past week was the fewest times we saw the Chargers and Herbert throw in the past month since the bye, just 27 times, because they were blowing out the Browns. The Browns were down by multiple scores in the entire game. Late in the second half, it was just basically the J.K. Dobbins show. He ran for 35 yards in the fourth quarter. Dobbins, he had a big chunk run, and then he got a rushing touchdown later on. They just weren't throwing the ball in the fourth quarter. And when your quarterback has been insanely efficient, this was 282 passing yards on just 27 attempts. In this game, Herbert averaged 10.4 yards per attempt, a season high, because multiple times the Browns, whether it was Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnson, just blew a coverage, and it was an easy touchdown deep for Herbert. And I bring that up because when your team is scoring broken coverage deep touchdowns, well, then the drives are short, right? It's a 60-yard touchdown for Quentin Johnson. So yeah, Ladd McConkey can't get any yards on that drive because the drive's over. But right now is a nice time to buy Ladd McConkey. The recency bias of his 29-point day is gone. He just scored 11 points, which is still fair, but nothing elite to keep him out of the trade discussions. He's right now top 24 in yards per route run as a rookie. If you go up to yards after the catch, these are some of the best metrics you could look at for predicting future success, yards per route run, and also yards after the catch, what you can do, what you can create on your own. You take these two things together with a good coach in Jim Harbaugh, a great quarterback in Justin Herbert behind a quality offensive line, I think we're going to get sustained production here. And if you're talking about what this schedule looks like, yeah, this upcoming week against the Titans isn't a great matchup, albeit at home, but then he gets some really strong matchups after that. At home against the Bengals, at home against the Ravens, who allow the most receiving yards per game, on the road against the Falcons, who have a bottom 10 secondary this year. If you're looking at the schedule the next month of the season, it's only getting better for Ladd McConkey. I think he's somebody you should send an offer to in the same, or send an offer for, and the same is true for this next tight end. And that's Evan Ingram, who, in my opinion, look, there was a lot of expectations this past week that Evan Ingram should be seeing a lot more usage because Christian Kirk was done for the year, Gabe Davis was ruled out, and Brian Thomas wasn't 100%. And that increased usage for Evan Ingram is exactly what we just saw. Because in this week 9 contest, Evan Ingram goes out there, he runs a season high 89% of the routes, and he sees a season high and team high 34% target share. A 34% target share for a tight end is rare air. It never happens. Obviously, for guys like Travis Kelce, it'll happen every once in a while. You'll see a guy pop up for that. But Evan Ingram has been doing this for years now. He earns elite volume from Trevor Lawrence. And in this game specifically, he was used often as a wide receiver. He was put on the outside. That kind of explains why he saw a season high 73 air yards in this contest. Overall, it didn't lead to an explosive game or anything. He caught 5 balls for 45 yards, just 11.5 fantasy points, caught a 2-point conversion. But all 11.5 of these fantasy points came in the second half. The Jaguars got shut out in the first half. Their offense was abysmal. A bunch of 3 and outs, really nothing going. So Evan Ingram scored 11.5 fantasy points right here against Philadelphia in the second half of this game. When you add that context in, that's pretty good overall. He was just missed multiple times in this game for what would have probably been at least a 15-yard catch and another deep catch, which if he brings in one of those, you're looking at an even better day for 60 yards and 6 or 7 catches. But the thing that stands out for me is we just got to see this usage from Ingram, 10 targets, a team high in a game where Gabe Davis didn't play. He might miss more time. Christian Kirk is done for the year, and that's the big one. And Brian Thomas was banged up and probably won't be 100% for another week or two. And the big one, as I mentioned, is Christian Kirk, because Christian Kirk operates in the middle of the field. And that's exactly where Evan Ingram operates. If Kirk is gone, who's a quality to good receiver, well, now there's less target competition in the middle of the field for Ingram, which we just saw this past week. And now since returning from his injury, his hamstring injury that he hurt in week 2's warm-ups, and he ended up missing a month of the season, since then we're seeing great usage, a 29% target share, 26%, 17%, and 34%. He's led this team in targets in 3 out of the last 4 weeks, and he's been on the field nonstop. You can see the usage is just increasing. 71% of the routes, 83%, and 89%. All of this is trending in the right direction for Evan Ingram, who I believe is a top 5 tight end week in and week out. And his nice role this season over these last 4 games has led to him averaging 7.5 targets per game, and he ranks top 10 in tight end efficiency. Now, Ingram does have a tough schedule coming up, but I'm really not concerned about it because he just wins in unique ways, and he's a tight end, a very unique one that has skills, athleticism, 6'3", 230 pounds. He's put in motion. He's put in the slot often. He gets put in ways to win, and I think that can overcome a lot of tough matchups. Now, a common question I get is, well, guys like Evan Ingram and some of the other players we're going to talk about in this video, who do I trade for them? What type of package should I put together? Well, I actually created a tool, my trades tool, my rest of season rankings that you can get with 21,000 other people. With the link in the description below, it'll take you to this page where you can get my fantasy blueprint. You get a whole bunch of other tools as well, not just the trades one, but that's the one that we can discuss for this specific video. All you have to do is click the link in the description below, follow the steps, and it will take you to this page where you can sign up for one of my 2 partners, either Underdog Fantasy or Better. And if you are a first-time depositor, you can get my blueprint completely risk-free when you sign up for them. And here's the thing. Here's why it's risk-free. It's a one-time payment of just $10. You don't make your fantasy playoffs, just reach out and I give you back that $10 completely risk-free. You'll get access to all the tools that I use in my fantasy leagues and 21,000 other people, maybe some of your league mates, are using in theirs right now. So to get access to the fantasy blueprint risk-free to help you win your league, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below. Now, the next guy we got to talk about is an alpha, and it's DK Metcalf, who this is the ultimate buy low spot for DK right now, because we just saw his teammate produce the wide receiver 1 overall numbers from week 9 against the Rams. It was a good matchup, but still 40 points. I mean, this is CeeDee Lamb type production from the previous week, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns on 13 targets. JSN was being used downfield. He was being used on the outside, deep targets nonstop in this game, something we're not used to seeing. So now he's getting all the shine in this wide receiver room. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf is still the best receiver here, because this was the second straight game where DK Metcalf didn't play with a knee injury, and now he's entering his bye week. So for his fantasy managers, he's been literally useless the past month of the season. And it's not even a guarantee that he does play in week 11. The Seahawks, they've said that we're optimistic DK Metcalf's knee will be ready to play in week 11. I am too, based on all the other reports that I'm seeing. Some other trusted doctors online have talked about this a little bit more, but now is the perfect time to strike. There's not certainty that he comes back in week 11. He's entering his bye week, which is a natural, nice spot to be trading for players if you're in a good position to, because there's a little bit of a discount. They're getting 0 points that week, and the manager who has them might be desperate for players who are actually starting. Now, you want DK Metcalf for a few reasons, and the first one is completely obvious. I mean, this guy's a freak. 6'3", 228 pounds. He is just an absolute monster. AJ Brown type player, maybe even better. 4.33 overall speed that you can see right here. And this is just a guy who's going to win. And now he was finally put in an offense where his skills are being used perfectly. Ryan Grubb, the new offensive coordinator from Washington, was known for passing the ball a lot out of 3 wide receiver sets, putting his wide receivers in motion, and throwing the ball downfield. And that's exactly what we're seeing from DK Metcalf, who leads the NFL with 18 deep targets of 20+ yards this year, despite missing 2 games. Let me say that again. He leads the NFL despite missing 2 games. Playing 1 to 2 games less than any other receiver in the league, he still leads the league in downfield usage. And because of this downfield usage, as you can see right here, according to Player Profiler, DK Metcalf's explosive plays, he has 11 explosive plays this year. That is 4th best in the NFL. Again, he's top 5 in the NFL in explosive plays. We know he's a cheat code for fantasy. He gets downfield targets. He gets red zone targets, and he's missed 2 games, and he's still that good. The dude is obviously winning on the outside downfield because of those stats we just shown, but he's also getting put in motion, getting put into the slot, being able to win after the catch. It's leading to a lot of upside, both consistency in his floor and massive ceiling weeks. Now, the last time we saw DK Metcalf, he was facing one of the game's better quarterbacks, the Falcons cornerback AJ Terrell, and DK Metcalf basically made him his son. He goes for 99 yards, a touchdown on 7 targets. He puts up 20 fantasy points before leaving the game early. He could have had an even bigger day if he didn't leave early in this one. I mean, this is just how good he is. When you're 230 pounds, you run a 4.33, you're faster than any cornerback out there and bigger than any quarterback out there, you're always going to have a matchup advantage. Now, if we look at the schedule for DK, if he does indeed play in week 11 against the 49ers, that's a fine matchup. Remember Thursday Night Football? He didn't have a great game box score-wise, but his toe was just out of bounds on a touchdown. He had a 50-yard touchdown called back by a phantom illegal shift penalty. Like, he was dominating that secondary. And then 2 matchups against the Cardinals in there, who have a bottom 10 secondary, one one at home, one on the road against the division rivals. So I think Metcalf, once he comes back, is going to be absolutely fine. I think the bye week is going to be good for him, and it's a good time for you to be trading for him as well. The next man to discuss here is another tight end. Then it's TJ Hockenson, who, remember this guy? Yeah, he actually returned to football in week 9. It was his first game back since suffering his torn ACL, his knee injury that kept him out all of this year so far, all of the offseason, the end of last year. Like, this was a pretty bad injury. And since it was such a bad injury, it brought up the question for me, at least, like, how involved will he be right away? Are they going to ramp him up? I assume they will, but how involved will he actually be? And luckily, we got those answers on Sunday Night Football against the Colts in week 9, where Hockenson ran 63% of the routes. He only earned 12% of the targets, just 4 targets in this game, but I was thoroughly impressed to see 63% of the routes run. This is a guy who, when he's fully healthy, will run 80, 85% of the routes. So it's good to see that he's already at 63%. He's already back to like 75% of his normal self. Like in this game, he was actually able, if you can see right here, according to PFF at the bottom of the screen, he was able to run 25 routes, 4 targets, which just pushed completely out of the way Jalen Nager, the wide receiver 3, who only ran 15 routes and 1 target. There's still some room to grow here. Hockenson just 25 routes compared to 38 for Jordan Addison, 39 for Jefferson. But I wouldn't be shocked if in a couple of weeks, just 2 weeks from now, we're back to getting 85, 90% of the routes run for TJ Hockenson, and he's quickly, once again, week in and week out, a top 3 to top 5 tight end. But when the people who look at his box score see that he just had 5 fantasy points, 3 catches for 27 yards, they might be a little disgruntled. Now, of course, it's not going to be cheap to acquire TJ Hockenson. It won't be expensive, but people who drafted him have had him on their IR spot, on their bench all season long, so of course they're not going to just get rid of him right away. But maybe they already have somebody like a Brock Bowers on their team, or another tight end who's been breaking out lately, and Evan Ingram, who came back from injury, and you can buy low on a TJ Hockenson. Because let's not forget, last season, Hockenson was arguably the best tight end in all fantasy football. He was second in targets per game behind only Evan Ingram at 8.5 targets per game, number 1 in target share at 24%. He was first in expected fantasy points amongst tight ends and top 5 in yards per route run. The tight end efficiency, he was that good. Now, of course, there's some clear caveats we have to talk about. That was last year, before a really bad knee injury. That was last year with Kirk Cousins, not Sam Darnold as his current quarterback. So I don't think we're in a situation where we're going to see 8.5 targets per game anytime soon out of TJ Hockenson, although I wouldn't be shocked, but I do trust Kevin O'Connell. I do trust his coach, his play caller, Kevin O'Connell, to scheme up TJ Hockenson, who I consider a really good player, some production. And it's usually easier to get that production when you're playing next to the best wide receiver in football, Justin Jefferson. Defenses have to worry about Justin Jefferson on the outside. They have to put extra attention there, which usually means guys like Jordan Addison right here, but also TJ Hockenson on the underneath will start to see a little bit more usage, a little bit easier of coverage, softer coverages, and especially for a tight end in zone matchups, which is like 66% of the game will be zone coverage. That's where you can get some real nice checkdowns and yards after the catch opportunities for Hockenson. And right now's the time to trade for Hockenson off of this down game, because now he's going to go on the road in week 10 and get the road favorite matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who allow the second most passing yards per game. And you look forward a little bit more here, and let's just look into the fantasy postseason, because yeah, you'll get some tough matchups against the Titans, although I don't think it's as tough for tight ends, and the Bears don't think it's as tough for tight ends. But heading into the fantasy postseason, what do you get here? You have matchups against the Seahawks, unbelievable spot for tight ends, and the Packers, weak linebackers, great spot for tight ends. So if the fantasy manager in your league has another decent tight end, has a really good tight end, and Hockenson's just been a stash for them this year, maybe you can buy low and find a fair deal for the both of you. Now, the next man up here that I want to talk about is Jakobi Meyers, who's quietly been one of the best fantasy assets this season when he's actually healthy, and we just saw him return from injury a couple of weeks ago. He returned in week 8, and right away he went back to having a great role on this poor Raiders offense. Because in week 8, he immediately plays 94% of the snaps off of the injury and earns a 24% target share. Okay, that's really good. That's like borderline wide receiver 1 numbers, a 24% target share, and it turns into a good day. He catches 6 of 7 targets, 52 yards and a touchdown, and keep in mind, this is a really difficult matchup against Kansas City, puts up 17 points, despite his quarterbacks absolutely stinking, and then he doubled down in week 9 this past week, and it got even better for Meyers. Because Meyers went out there and he caught 8 of 11 targets, goes over 100 yards, puts up 21.5 fantasy points in this game, runs 100% of the routes, wasn't leaving the field, and let me remind you again, was doing this with these quarterbacks, was doing it with Gardner Minshew, and not Aiden O'Connell. There's not even a picture on Player Profiler updated yet. That's how irrelevant Desmond Ridder is. So his quarterbacks were Gardner Minshew and Desmond Ridder, and he's still going for a 100-yard performance. Now, over Meyers' last 4 games since Davante Adams has been injured and also off of this team, Jakobi Meyers has earned a 42% season-high target share, 26%, 24, and 37% for a total during that time of a 32% target share, which during that stretch of games would rank top 5 amongst all wide receivers. Yes, you heard that right. Over his last 4 games, Jakobi Meyers is a top 5 usage wide receiver, and he's also producing very strong fantasy numbers. Now, of course, there was this recent news that their offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, was fired, the former Green Bay Packer player, who it kind of makes some sense, or player, the former Green Bay Packer coach. It makes some sense since Adams is gone, probably easier to fire Getsy now. They also fired their offensive line coach and their QB coach. Right now, Antonio Pierce is just firing everybody to try and save his job for another week or 2, but he's soon on the outs as well. But the reason this is important to bring up is there's going to be a new play caller now, so that could add some more wrinkles to how which quarterbacks they use, how they kind of have some tendencies, but I still think they're going to use their best receiver often, Jakobi Meyers. Now, one concerning thing if you look at some of the other underlying stats is Meyers' average depth of target is just 8.9 yards. It's 74th in the NFL. If you scroll down and you look at some other things here, Meyers' yards after the catch this season is just 90 yards after the catch, 55th in the NFL. But this needs more context. Again, he missed some games with injury. That explains some of this yards after the catch. And his low ADOT, if we go back to it here on Player Profiler, 8.9 average depth of target. Keep in mind, this is an offense that's been led by Gardner Minshew for the far majority and basically the entire season. He's not known for throwing downfield. He's not known for having a strong arm. He's a quick guy, get the ball out. So the offense has been built around that. That's why they're short targets for Meyers. It's not indicative of Meyers not being able to win downfield or win on the outside. No, we've seen him do that at plenty of stops in his career. It more so has to do with the poor quarterback play and Gardner Minshew, who was benched for Desmond Ridder. That's how bad it's. Let me say that better. It more so has to do with the poor quarterback play and Gardner Minshew, who's only averaging 187 yards per game, who all of his efficiency and accuracy stats right now look terrible. That's why he was benched for, of all people, Desmond Ridder. That's how bad it is right now for the Raiders. So now the Raiders enter their bye week off of Meyers' 100-yard game, and I do think with all the stuff going on with their poor quarterbacks, with their coaching situation, some people might be trying to sell high on Meyers, although I think he's a nice player to just be buying in general. He's going to come out of his bye week, and don't get me wrong, there could be a couple of tough spots here for you. He'll face the Broncos, he'll face the Chiefs, but then things really soften up as he enters the fantasy postseason. Look at these 4 matchups entering and in the fantasy postseason. The Buccaneers, that's a top 5 matchup for wide receivers. The Falcons at home to start the fantasy playoffs, top 5 matchup. And then the Jaguars, maybe the best matchup outside of the Ravens for all fantasy receivers at home. And the Saints, who have a bottom 5 defense right now as we are recording this. So I think the fantasy postseason is the reason you go and buy Jakobi Meyers, especially if you're in a league that has 3 wide receivers or multiple flex spots. He's the perfect guy for a consistent at least 10 points in your lineup with the upside for 20 plus. Now the next guy we need to talk about is Amari Cooper. And as somebody who has a lot of Amari Cooper in fantasy this year, I've traded for him in past weeks. And look, I think you should trade for him as well. He missed this past week with a wrist injury. And here's the frustrating part. If we look at the injury report, Amari Cooper down here at the bottom, the wrist injury, you scroll through to the injury report every single day. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, these LPs, he was a limited participant every day. He wasn't missing practices. He was at practice. He was deemed questionable for the game, but there was no reports out there by any national or local media that he was at risk of missing this game. There was no negativity, and then an hour before the game, he's just all of a sudden ruled out. So that was a bit frustrating, and it kind of translated into the game because the Bills clearly missed him in this one. Because in week 9, Josh Allen only averaged 6 yards per attempt passing. I mean, he had 235 yards. That's not great when you're throwing 39 times, and 60 of these, over a quarter or over a third of them or so, around the third of them, came on a check down target to Ray Davis in this game. You scroll down, this is how bad it was for the wide receiver room in this game. Ready? Ray Davis is the leading receiver with 70 yards. You have Khalil Shakur at 50 yards. Who else has any yards in this game? Matt Collins, I mean, a glorified tight end. He's a wide receiver, but basically a tight end based on his size and build for 30 yards. There was only one wide receiver above 30 yards in this entire game, and that was Khalil Shakur, who averaged 8.3 yards per catch. Nothing downfield was working. Keon Coleman got banged up in this game. They desperately need Amari Cooper in this lineup. And it's been a very weird start to Amari Cooper's career as a Buffalo Bill. Like, remember back in week 7 where he scored a touchdown in a tough matchup against Tennessee, got 16.5 fantasy points. He had 5 targets on just 12 routes run. It looked like everything was going to be great, but then in week 8, he lays an egg, has just 1 catch for 3 yards on 2 targets. We find out that he injures his wrist in that game, so that kind of explains it, and he ends up missing week 9. But right now is the time to buy low on Amari Cooper before he returns next week, and he's Josh Allen's #1 alpha receiver, because what is the competition right now? We know the competition. It's the rookie Keon Coleman, the 2nd-round pick on the outside for a couple of deep shots a game. It's Khalil Shakur in the slot, who's only getting check down targets at this point. That's not really going to steal where Amari Cooper wins in the intermediate to deep parts of the field. So Amari Cooper is the guy that you want. Amari Cooper is the guy who's going to come back immediately and earn a 25 to 30+% target share in this offense. And look, this is a guy who can win you weeks. He can win you weeks. You can trade something very cheap for him right now and get a guy who can literally win you weeks like we saw earlier this season. Remember in week 3 when he was still dealing with Deshaun Watson and the bad Browns offense against the Giants, and he put up 27.5 fantasy points on 12 targets in that game? These are the weeks that maybe not are going to be consistent with Josh Allen, but if you're talking about these performances where he can have 7 catch games, way more consistent the rest of the season with Josh Allen. The last 2 weeks of him having 1 catch for 3 yards and then missing week 9, that's recency bias. People will sell him a lot lower than he's actually valued rest of the season, and you should inquire about that. Because right now is the time to do it, because in this upcoming game, the Bills are 5-point favorites on the road against the Colts, who are bottom 10 in the NFL in coverage. They just allowed 137 yards to Justin Jefferson, and Justin Jefferson was doing with ease in the middle of the field and in space, and that could be Amari Cooper next week, who's currently day-to-day for week 10. So these have been the wide receivers you should trade for before it's too late, before week 10 and your trade deadline hits. And if you want to see the running back version of this video, you can check it out. We released that yesterday. It is right over here. Now, before you go, again, Don't forget, hit the subscribe button. That's the gentleman's agreement. If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to hit the subscribe button. It takes a while to make these videos. We put them out there for you. You get value from it. All you have to do in exchange is hit the subscribe button. It goes a really long way. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.